Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Andrew Ward. He's a freelance cannabis industry writer and branding specialist. Mr. Andrew Ward, how are you, man?
Doing well, Kevin. Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming on today and spending time with me in the audience. How is life in Brooklyn, New York right now?
Life is good in Brooklyn. We've got some really great cannabis laws going on. It's a week where it's not disgustingly hot out with the humidity. We've got low COVID stuff going, so it's pretty good. It's on and trucking over here.
You know what? That is so just music to my ears, so encouraging because it's been bad for so long, not just in New York, but everywhere. And to hear, things are good and things are opening up, picking back up, that's great. And you're absolutely right. Huge legislation passed in New York. And so what's the temperament? You're close to it being a freelance cannabis writer, heavily involved in the space. So what are people saying out in New York? What's it like?
So a lot of optimism. Things are really looking good in terms of the cannabis bill. We still got to wait for the final regulations and numbers to be put in, but they said all the right things in the bill. They address social equity better than a lot of states have. It's still going to be about the implementation, but the state's been listening. I haven't been up on the news as much as I should, but there was recently an appointment that was rumored to be coming on who was the cannabis czar in New York beforehand. And I know a lot of the lobbyists who pushed back against that, and they were longtime cannabis advocates, and the state listened. So we're still waiting on the final determination for everything, but there does seem to be a lot of optimism on the regulation side. And otherwise, yeah, just everything looks good. Hopefully, the bill turns out well, and maybe we'll start generating revenue. But most importantly, we'll stop making arrests and hopefully free a lot of people that are still in.
That's right. That's right. And hopefully the momentum with New York being such a huge state, right? Huge population, that it starts to carry this momentum throughout other states and eventually, forcing the hand of the federal government to move on legalization. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
it's huge, man. Well, and I know you mentioned that, you haven't been able to keep up with news so much because I know that you've been busy writing and launching a book, right? The Art of Marijuana Etiquette, which you recently published. Is that right?
Yeah, it just came out June 8th. Is my second book. It came out through Skyhorse Publications, which is through Simon and Schuster. It's been surreal. I never expected to be writing books. The cannabis journey is definitely been one that I didn't think I was going to get into in 2017, and I didn't know where it was going to take me. And it's been really great. And yeah, now it's exciting, but yeah, it's definitely hard to keep up with the news. And I didn't even get into the New York City mayor race, which you could throw the whole thing is there into the cranks anyway. So yeah, there's always stuff going on in the news, and then I'm always writing. And yeah, really grateful though for all the news and stuff to keep up with because we didn't have this a couple of years ago. So real exciting times.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I definitely want to dive into the book and what it's all about. But first, you mentioned 2017, is when you kind of had your start. So tell us a little bit about that. I would imagine you had writing experience previously, but what made you want to transition and focus specifically on cannabis?
Yeah, so I would have to take it back. I would hop over, as early as a kid, I wanted to be a writer. Probably as soon as I found creative writing very early on, I knew that was the most fun I ever had. And early on, I wanted to be a movie script writer. I love monster movies, horror movies, things like that. Um, so I originally wanted to do that. And the reality of being a screenwriter is it's a really hard industry. I know a few people that have succeeded in it, so you can do it, but I definitely didn't have the wherewithal to do it. So I was kind of just always had it in the back of my mind that I was going to be a writer, but nothing would really come of it. When I got to college, people recommended getting an English degree because at the time an English degree was supposedly a really great transition to corporate leaders and stuff like that. This is pre-recession stuff. So in '04, I went into college. I got into creative writing as my degree. By 2008 happened, the recession. I walked into it, and they're like, "Yeah, that creative writing degree is nothing. You're never going to be a writer. So again, I went back to the back burner. I was like, I'm not going to be a writer. Ended up getting a job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car when I moved to Brooklyn in 2010. That was an interesting time, not really for me, but an interesting time. But while I was doing that, I started writing again. The first job I ever had, and I say job loosely because it didn't pay, was for a publication called Film Drunk, where you had to write reviews based on movies on how drunk you had to be to enjoy them. And that was where it all started. And, kind of now it's full circle that I went from alcohol to pot. But, along the way, I just kind of always wanted to be a writer, and I kind of danced around the subject. But I grew up in a pretty professionally conservative sort of like community where people, told you to play safe and stuff like that. So I was like, it's just not going to happen. I'll keep the pipe dream, but I'm not trying hard, whatever reasons. And around 2011, 2012, actually, I should say, I found an opportunity on Craigslist to write for an electronic dance music website. And can I curse on this or can I not?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Cool. It was sketchy as fuck. It was a really sketchy site. I'm not going to name them because they're still active, but they hired me as a writer through the interview. And basically, when I got the contract, it said editor in chief. You're like, oh yeah, we've been defunct for 6 months. Run the show for, I think it was $600 a month. It was like 150 a week.
Oh,
and it's like, so there's no staff, nobody there. And it was just like, you're an editor in chief. And I was like, I've never had a written job before. So let's run this thing.
Here's the keys to the ship. There you go.
Yeah. And you know what but here's the thing I've always been I try to be ethically opportunistic about things. I just looked at it and I was like, no other chance in hell am I going to get back on track of being a writer. So I got a little bit of money, and I'm terrible at financial planning. So let's just go with this.
RPM. Yeah.
Exactly. And I had no budget, couldn't hire anyone for any cost. And I just went on and hired people across. I ended up, the job eventually fell apart after 6 months. But before that, I ended up getting a staff of 40 people across 3 different countries, covering dance music festivals. Like, we got big interviews. We were featured like briefly in a music video, which was like a milestone to us. So that kind of boosted my confidence. And
did that end because they just ran out of money? Because it sounds, I mean, you had 6 months, you did a good job in that role.
Oh yeah. So no, the job ended because they didn't pay me, and they were getting really bad with like not paying at all. So they got about 8 weeks late on payments, and the guy was not very bright. And he didn't have no business acumen whatsoever. I think he was a used car salesman on the side. No disrespect to them, but he fit the stereotype of one.
Right.
And basically, he just stopped paying me, and I was like, hey man, I'm eventually going to have to like take action against you. And he thought that I was like physically threatening him or something, and he abruptly canceled my like employment there. And then all but 2 people on the 40-person staff left because of it. And then thankfully, New York contract laws are beautiful. I went to file a Freelances and Free Act, which is a freelance protection that we have and not much of the rest of the world has. So I tried doing that. And then when they looked at it, they're like, oh yeah, this guy gave you an employment contract. So you ends up owing you like triple what he actually owed you in back money. And also, so it kind of ended up becoming a nest egg. And that crazy, weird, wonky job led to me getting a job at AOL, which is a joke. It's a joke in and of itself that AOL was operating by 2013, but like they were actually creating some really cool content on the video side. And I got to work on that, doing copywriting. And then that led me into some startups. And then that got to 2017. I was writing for a company called Anco that hired me for 2 different jobs, and then pulled a startup move, if anyone's worked in startup, and just changed my role 3 weeks in. And it just became a mess. And I knew I was going to get fired probably about 3 weeks in. And I just said, I'm going to ride it till the wheels come off. So I like worked there for 6 months, did the best I could. Like I didn't just sit back, but like I just could not make it work three positions. Yeah. And I just prepared for freelance life. And I knew I wanted back freedom. And I knew that being a writer, one of the roles I had was content, and the other one was partnerships. And I knew I could combine those 2 into becoming like a business sort of driven freelance mindset in the writing world. And 2 months after I had been laid off in January 2017, I was still not really sure which direction I wanted to go. And I was kind of bummed. I was actually thinking about going back to the office, thinking I maybe just failed on the idea again. And I was lighting up my bowl one night, and I was hearing an interview. I think it was like Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, but I've heard this advice before, but it was just hearing it at that moment was the right time. It was, find a job that you love and find someone that will pay you for it. And I was about to light up this joint, and I was like, I should go write about weed. And
I like
I had,
smoking weed. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and there wasn't really many writers on it. At the time, I had been familiar, I think, with Tom Angel and maybe like two other writers, and just High Times in general. So it really wasn't a deep pool. There were some good writers, but there wasn't really a deep pool. And I knew I could get in there either on the branding side or on the journalism side. And I just started plugging away, sending out emails and doing that sort of stuff. And then I went to networking events and they taught me to brand. And that's when I got into the Canna Writer. Shout out to Dashita Dawson, who taught me all that. And yeah, I just kept building from there. And 2017 took off and then eventually incrementally build up over time. And now I'm here.
That is so awesome, man. Good for you in terms of like, you talked about you wanted to become a freelancer and you had that sense of freedom. Like I can totally relate in that sense. In 2016, I left my corporate job to do my own freelance digital marketing consulting work. And, it's scary, right? You don't really know what you're getting into at first, but as you get, you talk to a couple clients, you get work, you understand how you can, price your services fairly and whatnot. And it's just, you are free, you don't have someone to answer to, and you can kind of do your own thing the way you want to do it. And what better industry than cannabis? Like you said, you're passionate about the plant
Absolutely.
to begin with. So tell me, like, once you entered there, you started doing outreach to these various publications. Like, did they just need writer? They need staff, I would imagine, because probably they didn't have a lot of journalists covering that topic, did they?
So there really wasn't. I was kind of just throwing different ideas at the wall at the time. I didn't know if journalism or copywriting was going to be really the way to go. And I had more experience in the copywriting side, so I kind of leaned into there to start off with. And one of the roles that I had had with Anco previously was a partnership manager. So I was doing a lot of cold outreach, doing a lot of biz dev, trying to like source deals, source partnerships, and that sort of stuff. So I'd already had that mindset, and I just started contacting companies. So what I did was I went on, I forget, I think it was Normal or the NCIA, one of the big groups, and all these groups, and they still do this today. I would recommend anyone doing this for freelancing is they have the membership directories of every company on there, and they even break them down by tiers, so you can see how much each one is paying, what their notoriety is, and that sort of stuff. So I looked on there, we get the brief examples of them, and I go check out their site, and I would look for weak points. And at that time, I didn't really have many offerings in my deck, but it was basically like I could write blog stuff for you, I can do email marketing, that sort of stuff. And I would just start emailing people, and yeah, I just started contacting them and building up. And it took a while, but the first couple companies I got were based out in Denver, working on the business side, doing B2B. And then they ended up having an inroad with a publication called Pot Guide, which is based out in Denver also. And that started getting me involved with them. And then my cold outreach eventually led me to getting a job writing in cannabis for Cannabis Culture, a Canadian advocacy publication as well. So yeah, kind of splintered out, and it was I don't know, it's just been a fun journey that's kind of been a spray shot of like learning along the way. And like you're saying, you kind of figured out along the way. I feel like I've been like a long term like establishing my sea legs.
Yeah, exactly. And anyone listening who is thinking that they want to jump into entrepreneurship or become a business owner, like, just know there's no set formula, right? Like, there's really, like you just said, you really got to kind of figure it out along the way, and it will fall into place if you just are consistent, you work hard, you surround yourself with the right people, and you're focused. That's really kind of it sounds basic, but in a lot of ways, that's really what it takes to start out. So during that time, Andrew, what topics were you covering? What issues were you covering, and how did that evolve over time?
So it's actually still been the same. I mean, I think my whole life I kind of take a generalist approach to things. Like there's a detriment to not being a specialist in anything, but I think there's also a lot of benefit in being a generalist. And for me, whether you horoscope, believe me, as a Gemini or just a personality drive, whatever the case may be, I love diversity. I love like mixing things up, my day, my role, everything I want to do. So when I got in there, I kind of used that generalist approach and appreciation for things to cover a wide variety. I got into the advocacy side. I got into regulations. I got into a little bit of business, culture, starting out. I also filled in on the SEO side, so doing a lot of listicles, even though they're not really my favorite. It was kind of, sites in 2017 2018 were really short on content, so they really needed everything. So anybody who was asking for anything, I told them I would take a shot at, and that kind of worked out to the point where now I feel comfortable writing pretty much just about everything. I tell everyone, unless you're looking for, poetry or technical manuals, I feel confident in being able to provide something for you. So, yeah, it's been almost the same. It's really interesting. It's kind of just a more amplified version of where I started out, but I'm still covering a wide general list of whatever I find interesting and what I think people would want to learn about.
That's awesome. Yeah. And later on in the podcast, I do want to dive into some of the most recent issues that you feel like you're most passionate about or that are most interesting to you. But we'll put that on the back burner and let's talk about your journey now to becoming a cannabis author. So I know in 2019 you released your first book, Cannabis Jobs. So why don't you talk about that kind of trajectory and what the experience was there and what the book's about, and then of course your most recent book, The Art of Marijuana Etiquette.
Totally. Yeah. So I would say the author side of my profession has been the most uncharted, unexpected area that I was going to go into. I thought writing a book would probably be just about as impossible as getting a screenplay. Um, there's people that will, rack their brains to uh, craft a perfect pitch and get a publication or a publisher to pick it up, and those are really high achievements, and I completely went in a different direction. It kind of goes in what you were saying, Kevin, before about there's no set path. Very few professions is there a set path you have to follow, and becoming an author is something I never thought I was going to get into for that reason. I didn't know how to get into that path. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't even know the first step, and I was trying to figure out so much other stuff. And I guess it was about later stage of 2018, I got contacted by Skyhorse, and at that time I was doing pretty well. I was getting a lot of cold outreach, or I was getting a lot of inbound business. I was getting a lot of leads from companies asking to work with me and things like that. So I kind of saw it and was like, most of the clients that reach out to me through my website at that time were not really the best clients. They were not really ready to book for business for one reason or another. So I
Right.
kind of shrugged it off. I was like, okay, you have a book, like you're looking for work. Okay, that's great. We had a conversation, and I'm kind of jaded at this point in my profession. I was like, all right, at some point you're going to ask for free work on a really large project. I'm not going to be able to do this because I don't have the time to do it. And like clockwork, we've got about 3-4 emails in. They're like, can you write a full chapter of a book for free? And I just told them, I was like, not rudely or anything. And this is something I would tell freelancers too, do free work every once in a while if it feels like it's going to be worth it, but really know your value and don't allow yourself to do much, if any, free work. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and you have to really know. Like I would say, if the Associated Press came out and said, do a test article for free for us to get in with us or something like that, sure, I'd probably
Sure.
do it.
Yeah.
Or
And you could add it to your portfolio if there's brand recognition there. But if you're starting to divvy out free work here and there, I mean, your time is money, right? I mean,
absolutely.
yeah. Go ahead.
And also it devalues you in a lot of ways. So just
Right.
really be selective with your free work. So I kind of, in my jaded kind of already been down this path, I was like, okay, no, we're not going to do this. And, always be respectful about it. That's the one thing, if as long as no one's being rude to you, don't dish it out. So while I was annoyed with it, I was kind of new at it. I was like, no, I can't do this. But I pointed them to the direction of my Muck Rack, which is a portfolio site for journalists. And it had about 400 bylines at that point. And I just said, if that works for you, take a look here. If you're looking for anything specific, I can find that article for you and send it. But I was like, I can't do a full chapter. I just don't have the time for it. And just assume they were going to be done with me and move on from there. And 2-3 days later, they said they want to work with me, and we got to negotiating. And it was really quick. It was really easy. It's I will say this: when you pitch your book and you get accepted by most standards, you tend to get a higher advance. You tend to, actually be a more substantial payday for it. So just consider that in the path you're going on. But for someone like me who wasn't expecting it at all, it was not so much about the pay. It was just really about the milestone and the notoriety and, the expanded resume opportunity here. So we got to work on it, and they pitched me Cannabis Jobs and asked if I want to cover it. And the big mistake I remember was they asked me how long it would take for me to write the book, or they gave me this timeline. I don't know. It's all a blur because this is one of the worst decisions I ever agreed to. I'll say is I said I will agree to write a 50,000 word book in 6 weeks, and while doing that, I was also going to
Whoa.
write for. So if anyone knows the way that I work too, I'm a freelance writer. So I cover probably about 20 articles a month writing. And then I also write for a website called Benzinga, which depending on how much they have me work, I write probably about 10 to 18 articles a month for them. So I was doing all that at once.
40
And
articles total a month.
about that, yeah,
And
ballpark,
they
yeah.
are they all different subject matter?
Uh-huh, yeah, different subject, business, culture. Like this is the downside of being a generalist.
Whoa.
I
Yeah.
like I don't think it's ethical to reuse content, but if I really was desperate at that time, it would have been nice to have like maybe something I could source material and
That's why I'm
reconfigure.
asking. Yeah, if you could like
No,
tweak
none
it
of
a
that.
little bit or like,
None of that.
oh
No,
shit,
no.
man. You're a
None of that.
machine. You're a machine.
Yeah, this is kind I mean, this is when I first got into cannabis. Thank you for that. But when I first got into cannabis, one of my first clients said, people in the West Coast will be in demand for East Coast workers because they have a stereotype that New Yorkers work hard, and it's
It's
vaguely
true.
kind of true. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not happy with it. I need to stop,
Well,
but
well,
it's got me here. It's worth
well,
it.
yeah, we'll walk down the streets of New York City. I mean, everybody's ing fast. It's just the culture of the city. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and Wall Street, I mean, there's a lot of caffeine, other things.
Oh my,
I mean,
just a bit.
yeah.
Tiny bit.
Yeah. So okay, so Cannabis Jobs. So that had to have been a surreal moment when the publisher actually, after you showed them or directed them to your portfolio of work, they're like, you know what, let's just do a book. Let's work together.
Yeah, exactly. And then it really was just they gave me the freedom. It's like, here's what we want. Give us an outline, do what you want to do with it, go with it, and make it your own. And I was, they were really cool. They were open minded. They definitely gave feedback, but it was pretty much we're on the same page. Kind of like you said, they looked at my portfolio, they knew what they were getting, which some clients don't, and that is always baffling. But thankfully, these guys understood that, and it was like, here you are, let's take it, work with it. And what was really cool is then I got to really see the action of the cannabis community and put things into work. And I could not have made the book possible without a lot of people who sourced leads for me, opening up their community, opening up their address book. Really, some of the two, Jacoby and Lulu from Revel, they were awesome. Lulu Sweeb, in particular, I think she got me like 100 contacts in her book, and it probably gave me 200. We just didn't get to connect with everyone, and that really helped. It did add to the thing because I was also doing 2 hour long interviews with people while writing all the time. But it's what made the book possible, and yeah, it helped expedite the process. And yeah, it was really my creation. Now it was really fun, and Skyhorse, to their credit, they allowed me to make the book what I thought was how I wanted it, and yeah, they ran with it. It was really great.
I mean, and the title is obvious, Cannabis Jobs, but so like specifically, is it about like featuring various jobs within the industry, or like what exactly did you cover?
So I think it covers 14 or 15 different of the most popular verticals at the time. And well, still are, but there's more expanding and diversifying, so it might
Sure.
be a little off at this point. But yeah, covered cultivation, dispensary, delivery, media, entertainment. Off the top of my head, I'm forgetting because I've been in such marijua etiquette mode at this point. But yeah, it broke into a lot of different spaces, and it's I still tell people it's a valuable book, but it's shifting because the data and the market demands are always shifting in
Of
cannabis.
course. Yeah.
So, a couple of the people that I spoke to said cultivation was one of the worst spaces to get into. Don't become a cultivator. It's such a saturated market, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward 2 years, and a lot of people are saying cultivation is where to be at. There's a few states where you shouldn't get into it, but for the most part, cultivation is a boom market. Lab testing was really in demand. That still seems to be in demand. Compliance is still there. Marketing, a lot of the ancillary fields are still there. So there's still a lot of applicable information, but the shifting space, it made it hard to keep up with the data. But it's interesting because now the book is used at Stockton University in New Jersey. I've been a part of their curriculum for 3 semesters and helping the students. So, I've actually been able to do sessions and show them, do a little bit of a lecture. And the first thing I always tell them is the data's off, but the rules still apply. You got to show up in the industry. You got to have an open mind. You got to be flexible. In some cases, depending on the market demand, you might need to move depending on what you want to do. so yeah, just show up and be an active, positive community member and learn, and you can have a chance of getting a job in the industry. And that opportunity is shifting certainly now, but we're also growing at such a rate that I think the opportunity is still going to be there for many more years to come.
For sure, yeah. And a book like that is super important, regardless. I mean, no one can predict how fast the data is going to change and what's going to trend and what's not, right? So, just the fact that you're featuring and highlighting these different opportunities that people can understand and learn about to enter the industry is important. And what's also important is your newest book came out, which you talked about, with the Art of Marijuana Etiquette. And what I haven't read it, but I'm gonna get it, so I'm committed to you on that. But from what I've read, from the about me or about us and all this, the description is it's something that's definitely needed because there's more cannabis users that are entering the space than ever before with the amount of public support that we have. I think the last poll was like 96% of all
Yeah,
Americans, right? Like what other issue in this country are Americans more in support with? It's kind of
yeah,
incredible.
nothing else at this point, I would say. Yeah.
Nothing, right? And so to have a guide or a book where someone that's entering the culture, entering the space new as a user, a consumer, how to roll, how smoke session etiquette, things like that. And let's dive into that. I mean, I think it's all great. So what inspired you to? Did you see that this was kind of a gap that was missing, or?
So again, it's it goes back to the unconventional route of the cannabis of my being an author. Skyhorse came to me with the idea of it while we were wrapping up Cannabis Jobs, and they wanted to get into it. And originally, they wanted to do it a little bit more, I would say, in a humorous, character-driven tone, where it was going to be kind of in the old style of the etiquette books that were written by Emily Post a couple of generations ago. And while we were hashing that out, I tried my best. I was on board for it. I always like a challenge, so I took it on. And day one of the book came down to write it, and I just was like, you know what? It doesn't feel authentic. I don't really like this, and it's going to be a really shitty book if I write it this way. And I again credit to my editor Jason Katzman at Skyhorse. I was like, look, man. Either I can give you this advance back and you can find someone new, or like let me go in a different direction on this because it's just not going to work. And it was kind of at that point, I'm sorry, I'm kind of tripping over my mind. Basically, I thought they weren't going to be on board for that. They said yeah, and they let me run with it. And it kind of tapped in the same way I did Cannabis Jobs, where I started tapping in my network, kind of hashing out the outline at the same time, kind of figuring out what needed to be covered, what didn't need to be covered, what we felt like might need to be rediscussed, what hadn't been discussed, because it is a topic that has been covered a lot. Whether you're on blogs, like if you Google cannabis etiquette rules, you're going to find a ton of stuff. You're going to find them on pretty much every
I
major.
noticed that. Yeah, like you have to
Yeah, it's
type
not the most
in.
original thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, when you type in book at the end, obviously yours is the first that comes up. But like to your point, there's a lot of or articles because it's such a topic that new consumers, I think, have an appetite for.
It is, and also from like a dirtier side of it, from the SEO, it just was really great for web traffic.
That's
Websites
true.
realize you can cram a whole hell of a lot of cannabis keywords into one thing,
Right.
so it works on both ends. Yeah.
Right.
But there was actually another big wrench that came while we were going along with it. Is we were probably about a third of the way, 2/3 of the way through the development, the pre-production of it, and we found out that Emily Post's, I believe, great granddaughter Lizzie Post wrote a book called I think Higher Etiquette. It came out like about 6 months before we were going to write ours. So we were like, crap, what do we do? Do we cancel the book? What do we do? And we waited for when her book came out, and we were going to read it and make sure that we had a different take, make sure that we weren't just going to retread and stomp all over someone else who had done a lot more work. And thankfully, no, it was really different. Lizzie's book is great, but it was something different. And we then kind of just leaned a little bit heavily, even more into learning from the cannabis community what really actually matters about cannabis etiquette against what people think matters. And yeah, it was kind of I wanted to discuss everything, everything from puff puff pass and pass it to the left to how to be a good member of community, how to smoke in nature properly, and also acknowledging the dark marks in the industry, like the war on drugs, and how many people continue to be arrested for it and stuff like that, and how to deal with etiquette and the law, and the many nuances of that. So I tried to make it fun, but at the same time tried to teach some people along the way.
Hmm. As you tapped into your vast network of people and resources to kind of put this story together, were there any surprises within the culture that shocked you, or that you didn't expect?
It's surprising there wasn't really a lot. I think after being in the industry for so long and talking to people, I was thankful that at least I got to anticipate and hypothesize a lot of the answers that were in there. Um, the two areas that I would say, were ones that either surprised me or I relied on other people to help me with. Were one was the most split topic in there was tipping. A good 50% of the audience said you should tip whether you're buying from your illegal or legal operation. So you tip your bud tender or tip your delivery person. Um, some people were adamant that you have to tip. Some people were, very much against it, which was interesting. I thought we would have a consensus on that. Um, and then the other side, on the legal side, I deferred, as a white guy in the industry, or actually just a white guy in America, I've said, I usually can walk around with weed, and as long as I don't smell or look obvious about it, the cops aren't going to hassle me. And even if they do, I'm probably just going to get my weed taken away and pretty much nothing else. I was like, a lot of other people have much harder experiences. So I turned to some people in the cannabis community, to cite their experiences and things like that. And, I think that's an eye-opening thing. And, that people don't always consider. And now that the last year or so that we're taking a lot more social awareness, that's great. But previous to that, we really weren't. And while we're celebrating cannabis culture and the legalization, and while we should be all excited about it, we should also recognize that, and just be aware of everyone's experience.
Yeah. No, that is something definitely that's so important to address as more entrants, as we talked about, are coming into the industry and into the space as consumers, because that is that's a mark in history, and that story needs to be told. It needs to be brought to the forefront. And, to your point about, people of color that have been, I guess, marginalized or picked out of the crowd more so than others for this plant. It's true. I mean, I don't know about, like, if I was, if a white person was walking down the street and if they were caught with it, if the cop wouldn't arrest them. But in other cases, I know that people of color are more prone to being searched, right? Like their vehicles, if they're stopped for petty traffic offenses or whatnot. And there's people that aren't of color that, are just kind of let go of with those petty traffic violations and not searched. And so, and they're
Yeah.
carrying, they're possessing cannabis. So it is that there is a target on these people's backs. And it's so important, and it's great that you're addressing that. And that was one issue that I was really surprised about when I entered the space as a podcaster in March of 2020. I mean, as a user, you just kind of think you like this plan, it makes you feel good. But then as you really start to understand and learn more about it, there's a lot of layers, and racial
Yeah.
injustice is one of those huge topics, due to
Yeah,
prohibition.
it absolutely is. And it's something I think everyone should learn. It's cannabis is great and we should all celebrate it, but there's a lot of a dark history to it. And one of the topics that I talk about too is understanding the language of cannabis. And in the industry, you'll hear cannabis being used a lot more than other verbiage. There's a reason. There's a lot of reasons for it. Scientifically speaking, it's the most accurate way of doing it. But also, it's just a lot of people consider it disrespectful because of the history of the word marijuana. There I mentioned in the book that some people use the term because they see it as a slang term used in Mexico and other parts of Central and South America. But other people see it as, Harry J. Anslinger and, Nixon and the other regulators through the decades that used marijuana as a demonization term have now kind of soured it to the point that they don't want to use it at all and it's offensive to them. And it's your word choice even matters because of the ties to it all. And it's unfortunate because this is the weird time. I say that as a joke in the book, but it's the truth. It's the weird time.
It's
Like
true.
it's 100 or so years that
Yeah.
cannabis has been told it's illegal. Outside of that, the history of the world, that has never been the case. It's been used by herbalists in the East since BC times, I believe. I'm not the greatest historian, but yeah, it's
Sure.
been way back. It's been way back. I mean, India had never even legalized or decriminalized it because it's never been illegal in the country because it's a part of their culture. There's parts of the world where cannabis is used all the time. So we're in this odd time and we just got to push it forward. And being cognizant of different people's feelings and stuff like that is it's always good.
It is good, yeah, and it's man, it's that's what fascinates me. That's such a great point that you brought up. It's almost like like they hit the pause button, right? Like if for prohibition, like the last 100 years, pause, stop learning about the plant, stop using it. I mean, it was a part of everyday life in society before that, and so
Yep.
it's almost like our generation, we're the generation that's relearning what our ancestors already knew. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's where would we be if we didn't have that pause? It would probably be a central component to our treatment, but also there'd probably be a lot less people dead from overdoses because if you have an option that isn't opioids, I think a lot of people would have chose that.
Right, right. And what I think is also interesting is the term marijuana, to your point. Of course, I've heard both sides of the aisle, what you're saying, and I've also heard a third side of the aisle, and I don't know how true it was actually on my podcast. Amos Lozano was telling me this, that in fact, from his perspective, what he's learned, the term marijuana is actually like he encourages people to use it, he said, because the natives in North America before the European settlers came in, they basically like called it marijuana. Is how they said it, and it was just a plant to the natives that they used. And so he wants to continue to use the term because it almost celebrates the people who first used it, who settled in North America, in the US before the European settlers came in. So I might be
Yeah, I've heard that
butchering
too.
that, but have you heard that? Okay.
Something along that line. Yeah,
Uh,
it's not something I've heard a ton of, but it kind of, yeah, it goes back to, it's a deeply nuanced thing where it's a regional term that was demonized by, colonizers and white people that were trying to scare the suburbs from fraternizing with black and brown people. So
right.
it's tough. Like, so yeah, I've always thought, from my personal stance, was I've wavered on it. For a long time when I first got into the space, I was very much against using it. And then after talking to people, I opened my eyes to it, and then I've wavered on it. For the last couple of years, I think using marijuana is the way that I prefer to do it. I think it is more of a regional term that deserves the respect, and we shouldn't literally whitewash it out because of what those lawmakers and those white folks did. So it's like, I don't know, I would use it, but I also at the same time I understand if I'm in business circles or around more activist driven circles or people who just express their concern over it, I just try not to use it, and I'll just say cannabis or pot or weed or so many other things you can use.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really smart approach. I mean, yeah, it's so weird this day and age of what you can and can't say and what's appropriate and what's not. It's like we're all trying to figure it out. The goalpost kind of keeps moving in a way, so we just can only do our best and try not to offend anybody, like you said, who's in the presence of you where it will be offensive, right?
Yeah, there's always going to be different opinions, especially because it's not like it's something like hate speech. Like some people do
Right.
see it as that, but it's not as cut and dry as some offensive words and things like that. So it's one of those things where you can listen and just have an open mind and hear people out. Like I said, there's other things that I talk about in the book that are like that too. Different preferences. Some people, whether it be dating or smoking or consuming in general, where some people don't want it or they have different things that are different views than you, and hear them out or just respect them and just try to let it go because at the end of the day, it's just not trying to cause anyone a hassle. And if you can learn something, great. But I just don't. As long as you come at it with a respectful approach, that's the best you can do.
Totally, totally. Smoke a joint and move on, Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to learn, great. If not, just enjoy yourself and relax.
Exactly. Yes. So what was the most exciting or I guess most fun part of writing this book in your view?
So I love the just diving into the whole cannabis world. There's some things even I forgot about it, or some of the areas that I didn't even think about tapping into at first. We got to really dive into areas that I don't think other etiquette books and blog posts and stuff have really ever gotten into. Um, some of the areas that I tapped into were buying from the illegal and the legal markets, sex and dating, it's areas that really had little to no discussion beforehand. So I got to talk to friends, different sources that weren't friends beforehand, and really learn different perspectives about that and shaping areas of the books that I hope will stand out as more unique aspects of it that also kind of line up with the traditional stuff that you would see in etiquette books.
Right, right. And is there any other like book ideas on the horizon now? I mean, now that you've published and you're out, or are you taking a little hiatus at this point and just focusing on the day-to-day stuff?
So, if Skyhorse comes to me with the cannabis book, I'm definitely open to listening, or if anyone else is. Right now, though, I'll be honest, how the sausage gets made sort of aspect of it, it's a pretty lengthy, hard process, and the payoff on a professional milestone career achievement way is great, but in a return on investment side, it's a little tough to justify. So I love books, I love doing them, they're great. But I also got to pay the bills in New York. So I got a couple different roads I'm going into. I'm also really focused on some big projects. Like I'm working with High Times on a second season of a series right now, trying to build up on that, and some other projects. So nothing in the moment, but you never know. I might be able to find a lit agent and work on stuff. I'm also open to doing non-cannabis projects. So I've got a few ideas there, and that might be where I pursue my books too. So I don't know, nothing on the horizon yet, but I'm always spinning my wheels.
You're always open, yeah, open and ready. Exactly. So, and what is that High Times series that you mentioned that you're working on? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, totally. So it's a series called Most Affected. It's a series profiling individuals who either were incarcerated or are currently incarcerated for nonviolent cannabis offenses. And we're just detailing, what happened to them, how the drug war affected them, what their side of the story is. The goal is to profile these people and, really show that the drug war is just largely unjust. I don't try to go against the findings of the courts or anything, but I like to show what the family says what happened, because the common theme seems to be, regardless of race, gender, whatever the case you are as a person, the claim is at least that there is always a conspiracy charge applied to you, and a conspiracy charge is a very easy to apply charge where basically someone can say you were in the midst of trying to commit this crime of cannabis distribution, which is a very broad conspiracy claim in and of itself. There's usually, overinflated weights that are associated. And one of the worst things that I've heard from people is, the constant claim that if they didn't take the plea deal, if they fought the charge, then they got worse charges because essentially they made the government take them to court. And,
Yeah, that is crazy. That's so crazy. I mean,
yeah, it's
how,
ridiculous. It's unjust.
it's unjust due process, right? I mean, it's almost like they're punishing people for trying to defend themselves.
That's
And
100% what it is. Yeah.
yeah. And the other thing that you said, which blows my mind also, because I've talked with Evelyn LaChapelle and Corvain Cooper on the podcast.
They're both in the series of the first season.
There you go. Yeah. And Corvain, I mean, both their stories is just crazy. But Corvain's like were they both taken to prison? I can't remember. I know Corvain was for sure on conspiracy. Like the guy
Yeah.
that was involved in the crime said Corvain needs to come to jail, and they just literally went to his house and brought him in. Right.
Yep. And then he went on a third charge, or a third strike charge, and got life on I think two cannabis distribution and one for mushroom possession, I believe it was. I could be wrong on that, but it's low level offenses. Yeah. And then Evelyn's was even worse. Evelyn was a single mother, graduated college, moved back up to the Bay
That's
Area
right.
to get her career going. She was working in the hotel industry and hospitality where she wanted to work. And she grew up in the Bay Area where cannabis, is a pretty much everyday life for people in the underground market. And she was asked, I believe by Corvain or someone in the group, asked her to just, process some money through the bank. And it was $1,800 in total over a couple months. And she did several years in prison for that and was separated from her family. And yeah, it's unjust. If you want to, you could argue, did race play an issue in it or not? Almost assuredly, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's an unjust system for everyone, and that's what I think what we want to profile in the series is the disproportionate effect that it has on people of color, largely Black people, especially. But everyone can get caught up in this, and once you do, your life and your family's lives get drugged through hell.
Yeah. And what I thought was fascinating about the conversation with Evelyn was she's like, what a waste too, like of taxpayer dollars and of my time. Like, cause she was put, from my understanding, at like more of a white collar prison where
Yep.
you know, it's so she's like playing racquetball and shit with strangers, like for, inmates, when it was, it's just
She
such
was,
a, it's a
yeah,
plant, you know?
she mentioned painting and crocheting was most of her most of her time in there, and her
Yeah,
family had to send money for her to do it. And why separate someone from their family for that? Like, I
exactly.
mean, if you really, I mean, first of all, she was relatively, I mean, she probably, sure, maybe she had some understanding that it was wrong, but it's like you're putting money in the bank. Like, that's really, even if you know what crimes are, it's like you probably could forget about that one. And
Right.
for you to send her to sway for several years for that, like, if the government really wanted to be, law enforcement, fine her. I don't know. Like, get your money back. I don't know. Like,
That's
it's so stupid. It's unjust, and no one should be in jail for nonviolent charges, cannabis or otherwise. Like, for most nonviolent charges, especially nonviolent cannabis charges.
Yeah, and that's just what gets me so upset is that why, like, cannabis, and it gets a lot of people upset, of course, is why cannabis is listed in the Schedule 1 listing when those who have been around it, have experienced it, or consume it on a day-to-day basis, they know that it's nothing like the other Schedule 1 narcotics, right? It's nothing like
Yeah,
heroin, nothing like. So when you hear stories like Evelyn's and like Corvain's and like Dante West, it's like, God, these people's millions of other people's lives have been ruined,
about 40,000 right now currently.
right? I mean, currently, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just
So
in right now. Yeah.
it's just something that it's a great series. I mean, that's, and I did see those articles published, so that's just kind of an ongoing series that you guys do.
Yeah. So we just got the green light for a second season. We are putting that all together right now. We have a good list of candidates, and hopefully we might be able to get more. But High Times has been great. They've been really open minded to wanting to get the series out, and they have a ton of visitors each month. They've done a great job sharing the story, keeping them on the front page. And they've been open-minded too about people, different types of stories too. We did one that was not entirely cannabis related, with Ross Ulbricht, the alleged founder and operator of the Silk Road. Um, his mom was largely a part of it because Ross couldn't speak much to us, but they allowed us to cover a bunch of people, and the ultimate goal is to just get more awareness. And if you support their cause of getting free, try and get some of these people out, because a lot of these people are first time offenders that have been in for 15, 20, several decades. It's ridiculous. So yeah, check out the series. If it's a choice between checking out my book or checking out the series, I would say check out the series and try to do some right and get these people free.
Yeah. Well, we'll put both links in the description box for YouTube for sure, but it is
Cool,
definitely an
thank you.
important series, yeah, to check out. So what other stories as of recent have been most interesting or top of mind for you as it relates to the cannabis industry as a whole?
So, I mean, man, there's so many. It's hard to cover them nowadays. Like, I used to have, a couple key milestone goals of things I want to cover, and dive into those for a while. And nowadays, just everything is moving so quick. I mean, in a great way. The green wave is living up to its name. We're seeing states left, right, and center legalizing. Connecticut, the most recent to sign off. Where's that going to take us? When is federal legalization going to happen? Most people I'm talking to are assuming 3 to 5 years we're going to see it. But political strategy could see that extend or could see it come quicker. Where's it going on the local level, though? I think local politics is really something that doesn't get discussed enough. I'm doing a two-parter right now on expungement for a publication called StratCann out in Canada, but we're also going to be doing one on why legalization hasn't happened yet in Mexico and the US. And there's so many different layers to it, and a lot of it is the local politicians, but then there's business interests and things like that. So there's so many different areas to dive into. But yeah, there's just a lot going on. But then you dive into specific regulations. THC caps really seems to be one that has picked up steam on the local and even federal level, with Cornyn and Feinstein mentioning it. THC caps are a big problematic one. I don't know how too familiar you are with it, but
Let's talk about it. I mean,
sure,
I've heard it
it's
at a high
bullshit.
level. It sounds bullshit, and it sounds like it's only going to fuel the illicit market, more.
Yeah, it's like high taxes. If you're going to implement them into your legal market, you're essentially giving more of a reason to go and stay on the illicit side.
Right.
um, you don't want to pay high taxes, even if it's for well and just things, because social equity programs in certain states have shown that you don't need high taxes to do it. You might need a little bit to do it, but yeah. And then THC caps are now probably the second level of ridiculousness in these sort of proposed regulations, because yeah, it pushes people to want to go to the illicit market, but it also, you really got to consider the patients. Like, the big thing that happens in a
Right.
lot of states when adult use gets passed through is that medical gets swallowed up and kind of disregarded. And states now are starting to work on it, either fixing it or are being more cognizant of that as they implement adult use. But a lot of states just got steamrolled over it. And with THC caps, the lawmakers completely don't know what they're talking about the patient needs. There's some people that really need high dose THC to treat
Mhm.
their medical needs. So if you're capping at 100 milligrams or even less, depending on the state, how much money is the patient going to have to pay to treat themselves? You think you're punishing the recreational slash adult use consumer, but really what you're doing is hurting the patient. It's I don't know, it's kind of, it's just an illogical thing. But one last thing about it that I've come across from people is, the reason why it happens is because so few lawmakers actually know about cannabis regulations. They're being told by lobbyists, they're being told by big business, and sometimes they're even just being told by misinformed advocates. That's much more of a minority sort of instance, but like, there's bad influential voices telling these people what to do, and they have no idea what the hell's going on. So whoever's telling about THC caps, stop, because it's just going to hurt the patient for the most part, and it's just an illogical thing when you actually look at it from a pragmatic point of view.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. That is exactly what I'm going to say. And I'll piggyback off of it, which is the education factor when it comes to these elected officials. I mean, uh, yes, they're listening to other, to bad information from lobbyists and other, protected interests, but their level of the plant is only one scope, one sided, which is under the lens of the Schedule 1, right? They
Yep.
see it as a narcotic, they see it as a drug that is on the street and people use it recreationally, and that's it. They don't
Yep.
understand that the science behind cannabis and that our endocannabinoid system is, we're biologically married to these plant, and there are benefits to it, therapeutic benefits. And so that's the hurdle that we have to get over with these guys is to your point, we got to say, you're not hurting the recreational industry when you're doing this. You're hurting the people that actually need it.
Absolutely. And that the sad thing is they've known that for decades. I forget exactly who it was, but in the 90s, I believe it was, someone from the Nixon administration admitted to them knowing that there was no real major adverse effects from cannabis, and that it was actually beneficial to you. But it was a suppression tactic. By creating the war on drugs, it was to suppress the counterculture movement of the Black minority reform movement, as well as the hippie movement. Nixon was just a massive piece of shit and wanted to suppress all that. And the war on drugs has done that. And, like you said, we could learn so much about what this plant did. Had that war on drugs not happened, the research would have been there. We would have been able to advance it. We would have been able to understand the patient side a whole lot more. But now we're just playing catch up to it.
Do you think that our country's history with prohibition of this plant has kind of gone in phases? So what I mean by that is, like, we know in the 1930s with Harry Anslinger, um, that in my view was a way to protect industry, threat to industry, while using people of color as the scapegoat or the target, right? So like, I think that they had an understanding that maybe this plant wasn't bad for you, but they knew that there were other applications of it, like from a material standpoint or even the therapeutic medicinal standpoint that we talked about. But so the way that they kind of went about prohibition was the reefer madness, blaming people of color that they do bad things when they consume. So that's phase one. And then to your point, when you talked about Nixon, phase two was really the emergence of this plant coming back with the counterculture, people using it more openly, psychedelics even were thrown in the mix. And then boom, Nixon's, whole deal was going after basically, like, what did you say his exact reasoning for the prohibition was?
It was to suppress the counterculture movement from
Right.
the civil justice and the hippie movement.
So maybe that, like their underarching goal has always been to protect industry, protecting the industries that could be affected, like lumber, like cotton, like biofuels, but they target people to kind of just suppress it overall, and not
Yeah,
be free thinking and conscious. I mean, I think there's two sides of it, maybe.
yeah, it feels like it's just like a suppression of anything they deem a threat. That was
Hmm.
kind of, when you're in
Right,
power,
right.
what the biggest goal eventually of someone in power is to maintain power. And the U.S. has been trying to maintain its power, and the more free thinking, the more not agreeing with what they're peddling out there, the more problems they're going to have. And cannabis, psychedelics, like you said, people realizing that being of a different color is not bad, realizing that a plant is not bad, realizing that these fungi based things are not bad, like all that it realizes, like, oh crap, this is going to hurt our stuff that we've been peddling for so long. So yeah, they're going to try to protect their industry and their money, but that's also because it protects the power infrastructure and all of it. So it just bleeds all one into the other for sure.
Where do you think that goes from here? I mean, like, obviously coming out of a pandemic, our eyes are open with all the things that you're talking about in terms of cannabis and even other things outside of it. So like, how much longer can the government try to suppress, or even like, the interested parties that are kind of working in collaboration with the government, mainstream media or others? Like, how is it, are they going to succeed at this, or are the people waking up, you think?
I'm saying bearing a like cataclysmic setback in the public world, like we're too far out of the box for them to stop it at this point. I think we're eventually going to have to federally legalize in the U.S. Um, yeah, it's going to happen. People are on board with it. It is the lawmakers though that are stuck and they don't want to do it on, yeah, and that's the federal and the national or the local level. And we just got to keep pressure on those
Yeah.
people. And the way that I've always been told is continually call and bother the hell out of them. Call their offices, tell them how much you want it. Like, tell them your story. Don't call once, just call once a week. Call every time. Um, it's different subjects and it seems to work every time. Just keep calling and telling them what you want.
Yeah.
It's a trying uphill effort, but it'll be worthwhile because we're getting close. And I don't think it's going to set back, but it could potentially if something really bad happened. But I think if a continued concerted effort happens, which includes, everyday people every once in a while letting their lawmakers know, it's probably going to get done in, my guess, 3 to 5 years, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a fair estimate, and you're absolutely right. Just calling up your elected officials, your state senators, getting on the phone. I mean, that's what played out in Texas. While there were small wins that came out of the 87th legislative session, it's all about the people on the ground making it happen and talking to their senators. Because in the state of Texas, from what I learned from Jax Finkel, is that you can't petition anything to get on the bill. Like, you can't get enough signatures to bring something to the forefront of your elected officials. You have to actually call them and have them do it on behalf of the citizens.
Yep.
So it's, that's such a great point, Andrew, and it's something that we need to continue to press on because the momentum's there.
Yeah, it's going to be a benefit. If doing it, it'll be beneficial. I know a lot of people don't like making phone calls, including myself. Go ahead and do them. You're usually just going to get the voicemail anyway. Just leave a voicemail. Just let them know how you feel, and just try to be respectful about it. Even though you're mad about it, these people are petty, so just don't try to piss them off. Just sometimes you have to play to the egos of these people, even sometimes. But like, do what you got to do because the end game is going to be beneficial. So give them a call every a couple of days, couple of weeks, and just let them know.
Right, right. Yeah, you might get their voicemail, or you might get their nice intern, which could be a
That
good
too. Yes.
conversation. So
Yeah, you sometimes do get good calls out of those. So yeah, give it a
right.
go. Local politics is fun. You can really see how things work or don't work in your neighborhood.
That's absolutely right. So Andrew, before we wrap up, the floor is yours. I want to leave you with final thoughts. What's top of mind for you? What do you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, well, first off, Kevin, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Hope everyone comes away enjoying this. Thanks to everyone for supporting the Art of Marijuana Etiquette, but it was also just my journey along the way in this. It's like I said, it's been pretty surreal. I never thought this would have happened. So yeah, I'm just going to hopefully continue to keep putting out articles that people enjoy. If you're not seeing a story covered by me or in the media in general, contact me at Andrew at iamandrewward.com. Send a tip over. I'll get back to you. It might take a while, but I'll hear from you. And feel free to follow me on social media on Instagram and Twitter at the Canna Writer, both accounts. And yeah, drop me a line. I will love hearing from people in the industry
Love it.
or just in general.
Yeah, where can people buy your book?
Yeah, that's a good point. I should probably mention that. Thanks for that. So you can, Amazon is the best one. You can go look up the Art of Marijuana Etiquette or look up Andrew Ward. But if you want to go to other options, Simon and Schuster, you can go to their website and look up the Art of Marijuana Etiquette. They have links to several different options, including some indie shops. So feel free to go there. All I ask is if you do, feel free to drop a review. It helps boost my reputation in there and help more people see the book.
Awesome. And then question from me is, where can I get a signed copy, Andrew?
Just let me know, man. I gotta come in your way. We'll make that happen.
Awesome.
Skyhorse is a little bit tight budget, but I'm sure we can send out one book for sure.
Oh, I'll pay for it. I just want it signed.
No, we'll make that work. Yeah, no, we'll get that signed for you for sure though. At least I can do.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today and all the insights. Keep up the great work, man. We need articulate, smart people like you that are just communicating what's happening on the day to day, because it is fast paced, as you know, on the front lines. So
yes, it is.
It's crazy, man. So keep up the great work. We appreciate you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, and keep up the great work too. Appreciate you getting word out with a lot of great voices in the industry. It's great to see more people need to be doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
Bye now.